Good day, sir, and to my co-criminology student. By the way, I'm Richard Magallanes from Kalisayan, Misamis Oriental. Today, I report the chapter 8 entitled Gunshot Residue. So, basically, gunshot residue comes from the powder component of bullet. So, elements from cartridge cases and gun barrel where the bullet passes. So when these components are burned, certain products of combustion are formed, which includes partially burned and unburned particles. So these particles are deposited on the target as definite pattern depending upon the distance between the muzzle of the gun and the target at the time of discharge. So upon discharge of firearm, gunpowder residues may be deposited on a person at close proximity. So the interpretation as to who discharged the firearm should be made with caution. So hand or body part close to the fire weapon may have gunpowder. So residues consistent with having discharged the weapon, however, absence of gunpowder residues on the person's hand or body parts does not mean that he or she did not discharge a firearm. So gunpowder residue may be found on the skin or clothing of the person who discharged the gun on the entrance bullet hole of garment or wound of the victim or on other target material at the scene. So component of gunshot residue. So first is primer or lead residue. Second is gunpowder residue. Then third is elemental component from cartridge cases residues. So composition of primer elements may be easier to detect in residues because they do not get as hot as that of powder. So major primer elemental composition: lead, barium, or antimony. So number 2 is trace element: aluminum, sulfur, tin, calcium, potassium, chlorine, or silicon. So number 3 is inorganic compound: mercury fulminates present in most ammunition manufactured in Eastern Europe and used in Middle East. So in addition, these residues gradually adhere to the discharged bullets. So those premier residue can be found in targets or wound at considerable distance from the muzzle up to 200 meters. So composition of gunpowder. So number 1 is contains up to 23 organic compounds, FBI study. So number 2 is nitrosilculose is virtually always present along with nitrate and nitrogen containing compound such as diphenylamine or DPA stabilizer in the powder. So type of gunpowder. So number 1 is single base, when the basic ingredient in is nitrocellulose. So number 2, double base. So nitrocellulose plus 1 to 40% nitroglycerin. So number 3 is triple base. Nitrocellulose plus nitroglycerin plus nitroguanidine. So that is the type of gunpowder. So this can be differentiated using a mass spectrophometer. So composition of cartridge, case, bullet, coating, and metal jacket. So number 1 is cartridge and premier, cases, brass, 7 to 3, copper, zinc. So number 2 is bullet, coarse, lead, lead, antimony, and few iron alloy. So number 3 is bullet jacket, brass, 9 to 1, copper, zinc. Some are iron or aluminum, aluminum alloy, some contains nickel. So gunshot residue examination. So the purpose of gunshot residue examination is to examine, or examination are performed to help the investigators in determining whether a person has discharged a firearm or not. So whether a firearm was discharged or not, and the possible gunshot range or the distance of the shooter to the victim, both hands of the suspect as well as those of the victim, the firearms and clothing of the victim must be examined to determine the presence of gunpowder nitrates. So type of powder used in the ammunition of small firearms. So there are 2 types of powder used in the ammunition of small firearms. So these are black powder. So black powder, this consists of a mixture of carbon or charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. So this mixture is used as an igniter in smokeless gun propellant. It consists of a mixture of 50% charcoal, 10% sulfur, and 75% potassium nitrates. So aluminum is added to enhance the burning property. So when this powder is burned, combustion reaction takes place. So number 2 is smokeless powder. So number 1 is black powder, then number 2 is smokeless powder. So this mixture consists of cellulose or glycerol nitrate combined with some stabilizer or nitrobenzene or graphite nitrates, dichromate, and oxalates. So when this powder explodes, the chemical reaction takes place. So premiers. To explode a low explosive flame is required. So in guns, the flame is applied by means of a premier. So premier produce flames or percussions. Typically, premier consists of fulminate, an oxidizing agent such as potassium chlorate or barium nitrate, and a fuel such as antimony sulfides. So this component is the basis for examination of gunshot residue. So particularly premier residues for distance determination. So detection of gunshot residue. So the following are common methods used by most crime laboratories to detect gunshot residue. So number 1 is paraffin test. Number 2 is lead residue or detection limit up to 30 feet and always present on the opposite side of the penetrate target. So reported from intermediate glass target present Missler and Armstrong 1978. So number 3 is gunpowder residue examination. Detection limit highly variable. Up to 20 cm and up to 21 inches is common. So number 4 is other examinations. So the last two methods are classical. Color development or modern methods such as neutron activation analysis or NAA. So atomic absorption spectrophotometry or AAS scanning electron microscopy with energy diffraction analysis or SEM-ADA. So, and inductively couple plasma with mass spectrophotometry or ICP-MS are used. So, history of paraffin test or dermal nitrate or diphenylamine test. So, paraffin test was originate from Cuba when Dr. Gonzalo Itorius first used paraffin for collecting gunpowder residue from discharged firearms. So in 1933, Teodoro Gonzalez of Criminal Identification Laboratory, Mexico City, introduced that the test in the United States, and this test, the hands were coated with a layer of melt paraffin. So after cooling, the cast were removed and treated with diphenylamine. So 5% DPA in 60% sulfuric. So methods of examination. Paraffin test. To determine whether a person has discharged a firearm, the paraffin diphenylamine test is used. So the basis of this test is to presence of nitrates in the gunpowder residue. So when a warm melt paraffin wax is applied on the hands of the allied shooter, it will cause the pores of the skin to open and exude the particles of gunpowder residue. So these particles of gunpowder residue are being extracted by the paraffin cast. So with the use of melt paraffin wax, and will appear as blue specks when diphenylamine reagent or DPA for brevity is added on the cast. So it must be noted that the specks are generally located on the area of the thumb or four fingers. So note, the blue color that appears indicates the reactions of nitrate with diphenylamine reagent. Those nitrates from other sources like fertilizers will give the same reactions. So other substances similar to nitrate known as oxidizers will also react with the reagent in the same way. So however, it must be noted that the blue specks have characteristics of tailing. So what is the principle behind the paraffin test? So while the burn and partial burn particles, so gunpowder residue is deposited on the target and in the barrel of the gun. So some of these born and partial burn particles may escape around breeze of the gun, and some may be embedded on the exposed surface of the hands of the person discharging the firearms. So thus the presence of these residues can be detected by way of paraffin examination. So as a rule in paraffin examination, the forensic chemist or chemical officer should personally conduct the paraffin casting on the alleged shooter. So however, a complement laboratory technician under the supervision of the examiner on case may also perform the paraffin casting. But it is the forensic chemist or chemical officer who should examine the paraffin cast taken from both hands of the allied shooter to determine presence of gunpowder nitrates. So paraffin casting of the allied shooter shall only be done within 72 hours from the time of the allied shooting incident. No person shall be subjected to paraffin casting after the lapse of the specified period. So embalmed cadaver who allegedly discharged a firearm shall no longer be subjected to paraffin. So examination because of the impossibility of extracting the gunpowder nitrates from the former's hand. So taking a paraffin cast materials and apparatus. So paraffin wax or MP38-40C. So absorbent cotton, bond paper, burner, beaker or casserole din tong. So procedure. So number 1 is heat the paraffin wax in a container until it melts. Allow cooling for a few minutes so that it will not burn the skin. So number 2 is let the subject wash his hands with water without using any soap or detergent. Wipe the hands of the subject with clean absorbent cotton. So number 3 is let the subject place his hands on a clean sheet of bond paper with the palms facing downward on the fingers close together using a spoon or tongue with cotton. So pour the melt paraffin wax on the hands of the subject from the thumb and index fingers and the dorsal portion to the little finger side of the hands. So number 4 is cover the hands and fingers thoroughly with paraffin wax and place a thin layer of absorbent cotton to reinforce the wax. So number 5 is pour layer of the wax until the absorbent cotton has totally absorbed the wax. So allow the wax to cool solidity before peeling them off. So number 7 is when cool, direct the subject to move his finger the first and slowly moving his hands out from the cast. So number 8 is place on the bond paper the case number, name of the subject, time and date, technician who took the cast, witnesses, and label the right and left hand. So number 9 is place another bond paper on top of the paraffin cast and staple together. So lastly, number 10 is place the paraffin cast inside an envelope or a box for proper preservation. So note, It must be noted that upon casting, the melted paraffin wax penetrates the minute crevices of the skin, thus the burn and partially burn gunpowder nitrates which are embedded on the hands of the shooter are extracted. So upon application of dipenilamine or DPA reagent on the paraffin cast, the appearance of tealing deep blue specks indicates the presence of gunpowder nitrates. So paraffin wax. Paraffin wax is a white. So translucent, tasteless, odorless, solid consisting of a mixture of solid hydrocarbons of high molecular weight. It is insoluble in water and acids and soluble in benzene, ligroin, warm, alcohol, chloroform, turpentine, turpentine, carbon disulfides, and olive oil, combustible, auto, ignition temperature 470 Fahrenheit or 245 degrees Celsius. So the melt paraffin wax penetrates the minute crevices of the skin upon application, thus adhering it. If there are particles present when cast are peeled, the burned and partially burned particles are extracted. A person firing a gun will likely have a particle located above the thumb and forefingers, since these are the surface exposed to the gun. So different names of this test. So Lange test, dipenilamine test, dermal nitrate test, or Gonzalez test. So name after the one who improved the test. Si Gonzalez test. So question, this there any means of removing these nitrates from the hands? How long will these stay in the pores? So non-ordinarily, washing will not remove the nitrates from the pores of the skin. So usually, gunpowder nitrates that are embedded on the skin stay for 72 hours. So take note that 72 hours. So that is why paraffin casting should be conducted within the specified period. So substances giving false positive result. So number 1 is fertilizers, number 2 explosives, number 3 tobacco, number 4 urine, number 5 certain cosmetics, number 6 food sample. So number 7 is cigarette. So remember that 7. So question, will these substances not give positive result for paraffin test? So answer, if the hands of the subject person are contaminated with nitrates other than from gunpowder, one will expect to find smudges or just a smear of blue color or a conglomeration of blue specks. But nitrates from gunpowder appear as blue speck with tailings. So because these particles were embedded into the hands with pores. So question is paraffin test result a conclusive evidence? Then why? So no. It is just a corroborative evidence which intends to support the testimony of eyewitnesses. So there are instances wherein a person who actually discharged a firearm would still give a negative result to the paraffin test because of several factors. So type of caliber of ammunition. A hand discharging a revolver is more likely to give a positive result for gunpowder nitrates compared to that of a hand discharging a pistol. So in an automatic pistol, the chamber is an integral part of the barrel, whereas in the revolver, the chamber is located in the cylinder and separate from barrel. So with airspace, those leakage of powder in a revolver is more likely to occur. So false positive result. So number one is contamination or transfer of gunshot residue or GSR. So to the body of mishandling or when the body is heavily contaminated or GSR from previous shooting. So number two is washing of hands where samples are collected. So number three is type of ammunition such as rifle and shotgun. So length of the barrel. Length of the barrel. So a weapon of 2-inch barrel will deposit residue over a large area than a weapon of 5-inch barrel. So even if they are discharged from the same distance with the same type of ammunition, in a longer barrel, the hand of farther away from muzzle ends of the gun. So it takes a bullet to travel in more time. So those using up burning up more. If not all of the nitrates in a short barrel, the bullet travels through the barrel in less time, leaving behind a greater amount of unburned particles. So aids of gun efficiency of mechanism. So complete combustion or the conversion of all nitrates into its end product or CONO or dash OH. So is more likely to occur in a new weapon compared to an old one. So besides leakage of gunpowder is more likely to happen in old weapon. So where the breech mechanism is no longer tightly fit. So direction of firing. More powder residue will be obtained when the gun is discharged pointing upward than downward. Gunpowder residues have weight and will naturally fall down because of gravity. So when direction and velocity, in high velocity, strong wind, the powder residues will be blown in the direction of the wind. So one is more likely to be positive for gunpowder nitrates if there is no wind. So or the wind direction is towards the shooter. So remember that. So humidity or percentage moisture in air. So humidity lessens to extent of combustion, yielding more gunpowder nitrates. So false positive reaction. So this is the false positive reaction. Smear of blue color or a conglomeration of blue specks on both dorsal and palm aspects of the hand. So failure to find traces of nitrates of the hand of the person does not prove that he did not fire a gun. But it is submitted that the paraffin taste has some value due to the psychological effect on the persons whose hands were found positive. So also the finding of actual traces of gunpowder nitrates on the hands of a person does not a gun. It is possible that the GPR's particles may have been blown on the hand directly from the barrel of the gun being discharged by another person. So gunpowder residue test on firearms. So the diphenylamine reagent is also applied to cotton swabbling of the barrel and chambers of the gun to determine if the firearm was discharged. So a deep blue color resulting from the reactions of nitrates with the reagent indicates presence of gunpowder residue. So establish forensic rules. So letter A is, or first is, the forensic chemist on the case shall conduct the gunpowder residue examination or GPR without delay. So second is, after the examination is done, the firearm shall be returned to the representative of the requesting unit if the request is solely for gunpowder residue or GPR. So examination or submitted to the FAID if ballistic examination is required. So gunshot range or GSR determination, also known as gunshot distance determination. So when a firearm is discharged, gunpowder residue may also be deposit on the clothing of the victim. So the size and density of the pattern of gunpowder residue found on the clothing are the main factors considered in determining the approximate distance of the shooter to the victim. So as the distance of the victim increase the size of pattern expand while density decrease and vice versa. So remember that as the distance to the victim increase, the size of pattern expand while density decrease and vice versa. So distance determination. The method of determining the distance between the firearm and the target. This is usually based on the distance of the powder patterns or the spread of the shoot pattern. Importance of distance determination. So number 1 is in connection of self-defense place. So number 2, in distinction between murder and suicide, it is possible to state with certainty the distance of the gun from the target by means the pattern and residues left on the target, not only the type of gun, but also the condition and type of ammunition that will affect this pattern. So, in ascertaining the gunshot range or GSR, the examiner should now note and observe the following. So, number 1 is entrance and exit holes. So, number 2 is powder residue pattern, burning, singed, smudged, tattooing, a black, coarsely peppered pattern. So, B, age of the gun efficiency of mechanism. So, complete combustions or the conversion of all nitrates into its end product is more likely to occur in a new weapon compared to an old one. So beside leakage of gunpowder is more likely to happen in the old weapon where the breech mechanism is no longer tightly fitted. So letter C is direction of firing. More powder residue will be obtained when the gun is fired upward than downward. So gunpowder residues have weight and will naturally fall down because of gravity. So letter D, wind direction and velocity. In high velocity or strong wind, the powder residue will be blown in the direction of the wind. One is more likely to be positive for gunpowder nitrates if there is no wind or the direction is away from the body. So letter A, humidity percentage, moisture in air. Humidity lessens to extent of combustion yielding more gunpowder nitrates. So powder tattooing produce black, coarsely peppered pattern. So individual specks of tattooing around the hole is visible by the naked eye. So the area of blackening around perforation will be found to diminish in size as the muzzle of the gun is held farther away from the target. So take note that the size of the area of powder tattooing will also depend on the following: caliber, powder charge, distance of firing. So individual specs of tattooing around the hole are visible. So to the naked eye, the area of blackening around the perforation will be found to diminish in size as the muzzle of the gun is held farther, and at the distance of 8 inches, blackening around the hole will completely disappear. A few individual specks of tattooing will be visible on the naked eye. So letter C, wound inflicted at the distance of more than 36 inches. So powder tattooing is seldom present. So nitrates found will not be sufficient for GSR or gunshot range. So bullet comparison, a type of examination using a microscope which is commonly used in comparison of an empty shell containing characteristics marks from grooves of the gun barrel and firing pin in of specific firearm use. So other methods of examination to determine whether the victim was holding a firearm. So one method used is by spraying the hands of the victim with ferrozine spray to determine the presence of iron traces. So that is Lee 1986. So hydroxyginolene test with fluorescent photography can also be used. Steven and Misler 1974. So a suicide victims' hands are stained with orange-brown color upon contact with gun barrel following death, presumably from perspiration with prolonged post-mortem interval of intact. So, latent fingerprint can be detected in cartridge and expanded shell casing. So, it is latent because the substance from perspiration mixed with oils from sebaceous glands are transferred via a substance on the skin, rinse to an object. So increase of temperature and low humidity decrease persistence of fingerprints. Brass retains fingerprints the nickel plate material given 1976. So firearms examination. So methods used to determine the probable time the firearm has been discharged. So locus test. A characteristic smell that decrease in intensity with lapse of time is present immediately after firing, but even after several weeks some slight smell remains. So now letter B, odor, hydrogen sulfide. So this is another product resulting from combustion of gunpowder which is present in the gaseous state. This compound can be detected by means or of lead acetate paper test. So if the breeze of the gun is kept close, this persists between 2 to 3 hours. So sulfide, the greater part disappear is in about 4 to 5 hours, but frequently a trace remains for a longer time, the longest period being 10 hours. So letter C, odor of the barrel or rusting. So as a rule, no rust can be detected inside the barrel of a firearm. If such firearms has not been discharged, but if the firearms has been discharged, iron salt are formed and can be detected inside the barrel. So these iron salts are soon oxidized, resulting in the formation of rust. So the formation of rust is affected by the humidity of the air, so that in the interpretation of the result, these factors must also be considered. So letter D, presence of nitrates by cotton swabbing method. So nitrate diminish after the lapse of time. Nitrates can be detected by swabbing a portion of residue in a barrel and mixing the residue with diphenylamine solution or DPA. So letter E, dermal nitrate test. So the test of design to determine the presence of gunpowder nitrates on the hands of the allied shooter. So distance from which the gun has been discharged. So significance. So in connection with self-defense. Letter B, in the distinction between murder and suicide. So it can be state with certainly the distance of the gun from the target by way of pattern is residues left on the victim. So scorching or singing. If a firearm was discharged very close to the target, as in a case of allied suicide and sometimes in murder, burns of source may result. So this result resulting reaction is caused by flame that emerges from the muzzle and travels only a short distance from it. So this distance will vary with the length of the barrel. So the size of the powder charge and this degree to the which of bullet fill the barrel, the presence of source is a proof that the firearm was discharged a few inches away from the target. Searching is very rare if the victim was shot 3 inches or more away from the muzzle. So that's all. Thank you very much.